Okay, to respect everybody's time, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to another NESI-ISPAH webinar series. Today we're going to discuss career pathways at the World Health Organization and the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. Today we're going to be using a new format that we've never used in these types of webinars. I'll be discussing with our speakers, asking them questions, everyone in a row, and then we'll open up to audience every 2 to 3 questions from me for questions that the audience can share about the topics that I introduced or about anything else that they wish to ask in that moment. So probably every 10 to 20 minutes, the audience will have the opportunity to ask questions. Please write down your questions in the Q&A section. I think you can all see this in the top bar menu of your Zoom platform. As always, the webinar today will also be recorded, and you can find it on ISBNPA's website under recorded webinars, and you can find any other webinars also there too. For the webinar system, you can, like I mentioned, write your questions on the Q&A box as soon as you have them, and we'll answer them during the discussion when we do the triage. So today our speakers are Dr. Isabela Sattamini, who is a nutrition consultant at the Nutrition and Food Systems Division, Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, and Dr. Thiago Herick De Sa, who is a technical officer at the World Health Organization. And this is it. I'll go ahead and start the conversation with our speakers. So welcome, Thiago and Isabela. Thank you very much for being with us today and for agreeing to participate in this conversation. So my first question to Isabela, would you mind sharing with us, with our audience, what is your academic background, please?
Yes, hello everybody. Thank you, Patrick, for this invitation. So I'm a nutritionist, and so I did undergrad nutrition university, and then I went straight to my master's, where I in public health, in health promotion and environments, where I studied Brazilian food security policies. And then I started working also as a consultant in the Cancer Institute in Brazil, and then did my PhD in public health nutrition in São Paulo University.
Okay, thank you very much for this brief description. Thiago, what about yourself? What is your academic background?
Well, Patrick, thank you very much for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to be here with the colleagues on the other side, and with Isabela, a good friend from our time in Brazil. My background is as a physical educator, as an undergrad. I also did my master's in public health, mainly in health education, where I helped to develop a training program about physical activity for primary care healthcare workers, especially community health workers, and the PhD also in public health nutrition, where I described the patterns of active commuting in Brazil and Latin America, and assessed the health impacts of transport and land use policies, mainly in São Paulo. All of that at the University of São Paulo, with some external connections.
Okay, great. I'm interested to know now, maybe we can continue with you, Thiago. What led you to a career with the World Health Organization, and what does a career where you are now look like?
So I think the main reason why I decided to join the organization was to, well, the three at least. One was to apply the knowledge and the experience I had as a researcher, and the opportunity that being in such organization offers in that sense. the getting out of the comfort zone and having a different experience and learning a different way of doing things to benefit public health. And the third one was to get to strengthen my international experience and live abroad, have a different network. So I think these were the three main reasons for joining the organization.
Okay, thank you. Isabela, what does a career look like with the FAO?
Yeah, so I've worked with FAO's references and reports ever since undergrad. So it's been a reference to me since I know about its existence. So FAO is a reference. So actually FAO is most focused in agriculture.
Okay.
And WHO is most focused in like health, if we can put it that way. But FAO is also developing now other activities in, for example, obesity prevention. So it's always updating their programs and their themes. So the career, so the project now that I'm working is in its own research. So we do a lot of research to then publish the reports to work as reference for countries to apply that knowledge. But there are research and there are intervention projects. So FAO headquarters in Rome, Italy, supports member countries in applying policies for agriculture and nutrition. Let's say it like that.
Okay, maybe I can ask you a follow-up question on that. I think both of you described some research aspects of your job, but what does a typical day or week or month look like in your job? If you can give us a little bit more details, how would you describe your days and weeks like that? Are you in the field? Are you behind a desk? Things like that, maybe.
Well, maybe I can start. And as Isabela mentioned, one of the things that we do quite a lot, especially now that there is this growing demand for a one UN system, is to liaise with colleagues, because one single organization will not solve the major issues. So one important aspect is that we are on a daily basis talking to external partners, within the UN system, outside the UN system, but we're also talking with our partners within our own organizations, because they are large and they are diverse, and they have different levels as well. So you have country offices, regional offices, and you have to make sure now that you have this coordination happening on a daily basis, I would say.
Okay.
Apart from that,
so
of
maybe
course,
lots of emails, lots of communications.
Lots of emails, lots of meetings, lots of phone calls, lots of document exchanges. Also, at least in my case, as a technical officer, so I combine the normative work, the guidance work that WHO, that is one of the core mandates of WHO as a normative agency, to produce guidance on health-related issues. So this is a substantial part of the work I do, but also support to countries. So another big chunk of the work that we do is to prepare for and attend missions. And then the missions vary. They go from attending major conferences to ensure global leadership, or to support a Ministry of Health or city on a specific topic. So it really varies. But I would say the three main areas would be, office work, normative work, and the missions.
Okay. What about you, Isabela? What would you answer to that question?
Yeah, the majority is on the desk, but we also go on missions. So the project I'm working right now is we have country partners that it's two in Africa, it's Zambia and Ethiopia, and one in Asia that it's Cambodia. So we go there for capacity development workshops. We support dissemination of the results. So we act also as technical work, but also as a project manager, because we are also taking care of a lot of like budget and taking care of all of the developments of the project. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. I have a follow-up question on this, but I'll go ahead and see if we have any questions from the audience. Antonio, do you have any questions that you think we can ask the speakers right now?
Sorry, I was muted. We don't have any open questions at this point, so maybe it's a good idea to let our colleagues know that they can post the questions either via the Q&A or the chat feature. So,
okay, thank you for making that clarification.
I think while the participants think about questions, if they have any, I think one point that neither Isabella or I mentioned is, of course, the day-to-day bureaucracy, that exists in any organization, any university institution. So there's a lot of office work that is related to process, to clearances, to memos, to get things through. It's also true that in the UN system, you have to have, and it's right to have, a lot of firewalls, a lot of ways to ensure that we are not engaging in partnerships with vested interests. So we have to follow certain procedures to secure that. So
Right.
this is also an important part of the work that we do.
That takes up a bunch of time, probably, too.
It does.
A lot of process documentation. So we are always making reports about everything that we do, which is very helpful for other colleagues. So on each mission that we do, we have our back to office report. And that's circulated for everybody in the organization. So everybody knows what you're engaged in, and also when you're away, that someone can take care of what you are doing, because so we have a lot of transparency. So yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's necessary.
Yeah, you have to make sure that people trust you by making sure that you say everything that you're doing clearly without any biases or hiding things.
Yes.
And that you have an institutional memory as well. Now, let's imagine that next week Thiago is no longer here. Someone that comes in has to have the capacity to pick that up and continue the work.
Right. Yeah,
and I think
this is your note, they'll be able to continue what you were doing as if it was you still being in that role.
Yeah, I think two changes that I realized now after moving from academia to the organization is that your corporate function is larger, meaning that in academia many times we refer to ourselves. That's how the system is structured. So Patrick is Patrick producing papers according to what Patrick
I'll talk about my team.
Right, but in our case, in many times you speak on behalf of the organization. So it's not Thiago, it's not Isabella, it's WHO, it's FAO, and that is different.
Okay.
And the other part is that we have to be, at least in my experience, much faster to react to requests. So even though we try and plan as good as we can, in the end there are many requests that come and we have to respond quickly to those, and that is certainly not necessarily the case in the academic world.
So maybe your planning for day-to-day task is affected because of that too, because you can have random requests at any moment, so you have to be really organized to plan how you move things, your tasks forward, or how you
and really flexible when you have to accommodate these requests.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what's like in WHO, but in FAO, we work a lot with emergencies too, on food security emergencies due to conflict or to catastrophes, natural disasters, or human-led disasters. So whenever it's possible to support a community that is in food insecurity, we have to act really fast and support the countries in this assistance too. So
Yeah,
Okay.
that is very much the case here with especially the colleagues working in emergencies. Now you have both emergency response and preparedness for major public health issues, including Ebola or hurricanes, any natural and non-natural disasters. But even in the case of departments or units that are not necessarily dealing with emergency, several times we get requests of a technical nature for which we need to respond quickly. Just to give a concrete example, suddenly you have an outcry in a given country because the air pollution levels are very high, but a marathon is scheduled. So what do we do? Physical activity is good for you, air pollution is bad for you. So what is the guidance that WHO can provide in that regard? So we get a request from, for example, the Ministry of Health or the municipality, and when we try to provide the best available evidence-based response to that type of demand.
Okay, perfect. I think we have a question from the audience. Let me see. I see something in our chat. With them. Okay, there's a question to you, Thiago. There are numerous WHO collaborating centers around the world. Do you actually engage with them? If so, how?
Oh, we do. We do engage with the collaborating centers very much. Of course, there are many collaborating centers, and they are area specific. And they are area specific and they are region specific. So I either interact directly with the collaborating centers for which I am the technical responsible officer, making sure that whatever has been agreed in the terms of reference of the collaborating center is implemented and supports the work that we do. But I also provide my feedback and my review when I am the technical counterpart for a collaborating center, because in the WHO system, for every collaborating center, you have to have both a responsible officer and a technical counterpart. And I should say that they are fundamental for the work that we do. The network of collaborating centers is one of the main assets that we have to support the work that we do. Definitely.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'm gonna move to another question. We have a question from the audience that is related to something that I'm gonna ask you a little later. Joyce and Natalie, if I don't ask your question specifically in the next moments, please remind me to ask them. So my next question related to your career also is, what are the benefits and challenges of pursuing your careers? And Isabela, would you mind starting us off?
Yeah, well, I see a lot of benefits, and the challenges as also a good thing. So the benefits is actually, I think, number one would be to have a meaningful work. So that's very fulfilling when you're able to actually work with all the knowledge that you've pursued throughout your academic career. So I feel number one would be to engage in communities and see the results of your work. Although, so the challenge would be involved in sometimes not seeing straightforward results, because there are a lot of challenges regarding political problems, or even so when you idealize a policy when you're in your office is sometimes very different when you apply in the locals and in the local situation. So I think the challenges is something that will make you want to improve more. And so, for example, travel a lot, for me, it's a benefit, not a challenge. And this can also be something that in our career, if the person has a small baby and they can't travel, they also have this type of support. So, and in the UN, we work with people from all parts of the world, so that's very enriching too. So yeah, I think that's my point of view.
Okay, Do you share similar points of view, Thiago, or do you have a
Oh,
comment?
absolutely. I think for as someone passionate about public health, there's no other place I would like to be other than WHO. You are at the at the custodian of public health on a global scale, so you have the opportunity to move the agenda, to contribute to solving some of the major public health issues. And then if you work in your area of passion, which is my case, it's urban health, sustainable mobility and health, even more so. So I think that's the main benefit. Not to mention, of course, what Isabela has just said, the fact that you engage with a very diverse group of people across the globe. You have a very rich environment, and you learn a lot. And I think that the challenges will very much depend on the expectations you have, on the mismatch between the expectations you have, or maybe the inadequacy of the position you are for what you're good at. I think this is a common challenge that some people face. And of course, some practicalities if you have family and you have to travel a lot, or if you are in a non-family station, which is the case of some of the country offices of WHO in areas where security is not necessarily the highest, and you have to be away and not live with your family for quite some time. So I think the challenges will also very much depend on where you are and the nature of the job that you
Right.
do.
Yeah, your personal life is different when you work in an organization that makes you travel all the time like that, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, could either of you talk maybe about the expectations of your work then, since you touched a little bit about balancing your life? Are you expected to work a lot? How does that work?
Well, as I said, I think one expectation that differs from academia is that you have to react fast. You have to accommodate for work on weekends and beyond office hours, but I don't think that is that different from some academia or private companies. Of course, it's also expected that eventually you contribute with your knowledge and competencies to other areas of work, right? Which is part of this, this idea of sharing. But the expectations will very much depend on where you are and what you do, because even within WHO is a very complex, beast with different tentacles, and it really depends what's your role in this whole machinery.
Okay. Isabela, any comment?
Yeah, no, I think the expectations are as Thiago said, sometimes when we have a big overload of work, you're gonna be spending more time in office, but in many careers this would happen, and so I don't see it as a problem either. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know in academia, for example, where I live, we're expected when we are a full professor or a professor to work 35 hours a week, but everybody works more than that, and it's not. It's almost as if people encourage each other to work more. It's like a culture that it looks good if you work a lot and you're only compensated for a certain weekly number of hours. Is that similar then at the WHO and FAO?
Yeah, so for example, sometimes we are talking, we have a conference call with a country and they are in a different time zone. So sometimes we have to do a conference at 6 a.m. because that's when they are available. Right. So, and sometimes we just stayed up until 8 p.m. finishing reports, and like this can happen sometimes, but it's not the routine. So.
Okay. Okay, I think I'm going to ask there are different questions from the audience related to the job application process, and our audience is interested in knowing how you applied to your current jobs, and how did you feel, if you felt overwhelmed by the process, what kind of things did you put in your application to be very competitive, and which skills or CV aspects do you think these types of jobs WHO or FAO would be looking for?
I would say that it is an overwhelming process because the applications are very long and detailed, so it takes some time. But I would recommend, if you're interested in this type of job, that you apply to all of the positions you can. Of course, the ones that are meaningful to you, because you can, maybe you're not selected, but your CV can go to like can be used in future opportunities. So they will keep your CV for future opportunities, and that's what happened with me. So for my position, I applied 1 year ago and I was not selected, but I later learned that I was like second position, and then this person who was working in my position left for another job, and then I was called, so like 1 year later after my application.
Okay.
And I think what makes it really competitive is if your field of research is the same as what they're doing here. So for my master's and my PhD, I selected one of FAO's priority areas, and one of their reports where they said what would be the next steps on their work, and then I did it in my PhD. So like my CV ended up being perfect for this position. Yeah.
Okay, so you showed them that you actually went ahead and looked to fill the gaps in what they were looking for, so they saw you as an expert in that.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and I think doing some homework is very important. So understanding, because the UN is very diverse. So if you come to WHO with the expectation that you're going to work on like similar to what the World Food Program does, or UNICEF sometimes does, like really on the ground, raising awareness all the time, you might get frustrated unless you're in a specific unit here that does that. Because overall, WHO is a normative agency. Then if you are at WHO headquarters, or if you are at WHO country office, let's say in Brazil, we have a WHO country office, or in China, or in Zambia, and you want to do normative work, perhaps that's not the ideal place to be, because the country office, the core of its business is to support the country activities, to support the ministries and the cities in that country. So I think doing some homework is important. And as regards to the complexity of the application, that very much depends also on the type of job you're applying to. Because if you apply to a coordinator's position, then it's really complex. If you're applying for a short-term staff position, the level of complexity is much smaller, and so on and so forth.
Okay. And once you're in the system, it might be easier to apply to other jobs. If you, let's say I applied for a short-term contract, is it easier for me to apply for another job that is longer term after that, or it's not like that? And
I think it's certainly easier because you learn the system. No, it's always even though you can try and as your homework very well, and then trying to understand the best you can from outside. Being inside gives you much more information about how the system works.
Yeah, and I think there's a preference for people who already worked in the organization, and also if you worked in the country office, that gives you more competitivity also to be selected for the headquarters, for example. Yes.
Thiago, Isabela mentioned that her research and during her PhD, she was very purposeful about using something that the FAO said they needed to fill as a gap. Did you use similar strategies to make your application the most competitive possible, or what other strategies may have you used?
No, I think what I used more in my case was trying to match what my skills with the needs. Similar to what Isabela has mentioned. Of course, not being exposed and regularly using WHO publications, but also UN Habitat publications, which is one of the agencies we work quite a lot together. We're now producing a joint report on how to integrate health in urban and territorial planning. They are supporting us on country implementation in Accra and Kathmandu. That certainly helps.
Okay.
But I think the most important is that you read the application and you see yourself there, and I would say if you don't try to tweak your CV towards the application if the match is not, of course it will never be
Perfect match.
Perfect match, but if the mismatch is too big, then perhaps that position is not for you.
Okay. So did you both of you feel that you fulfilled all the stated requirements for those jobs when you applied, or were there things that you didn't fulfill when you applied?
Yeah, mine I fulfilled. I fulfilled, but
All the requirements?
I think if you're interested and you don't fulfill, I think you should try anyway, because sometimes when you're recruiting, you don't have the ideal candidates, and you have to go with the best candidate among.
Right, and you might do the best.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So no problem there, of course.
And even if you fulfill the requirements of the application to get in, certainly you will need, once you're in, to learn a lot. And again, as Isabela has mentioned, if you have been previously in the UN system or in that particular organization, that helps a lot, because some of the skills you cannot not only say that you have, but you can prove with evidence that you have practiced them in this environment.
Right. Yeah, because for example, I joined the organization only 2 months ago, so I've been learning a lot about the processes and how to do everything. So once the personnel is qualified for this, like they will give a preference to continue keeping them in the organization, because it's so much work to learn everything. Yes.
Of course, yeah, of course. Do you think there were any prior experiences before you joined the organization that were very relevant for you to be able to join the organization?
Yes. I worked, I had this great opportunity in my PhD to work with the Gallup project, which had a FAO officer and an independent researcher that visited Brazil, and I coordinated the research. So with exactly the same theme that I was working in my PhD, and is also the work that I'm doing here now. So that was crucial to improve my CV and my experience on the type of work I'm doing now. So sometimes I know countries work in different ways, but in Brazil, you have a Brazilian way of doing things that is very different from international projects. So having experience with international projects is very important.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would say not to be, perhaps the main aspect that benefited me was not to be confined to the academic world. So I worked quite a lot, even from academia, I worked quite a lot with municipal authorities, with national authorities. I contributed to national processes with ministries. I tried to engage in non-academic conferences in which some of these actors usually are, like WHO, FAO, C40, private companies. There are several other organizations that are not necessarily in this space academics usually operate.
Okay.
Yeah, I mentioned the international project, but I also worked for 5 years in the National Cancer Institute, where I was collaborating very closely to the Ministry of Health and also doing exactly what Thiago mentioned. Yes.
Okay. So I think you kind of talked a little bit both about, maybe Thiago talked a little bit more about this, going to conferences that were not academic only. Because I think you obviously have to network to make yourself marketable for these types of jobs too. But these conferences, if they're not in academia, what do you present at them, or what are these types of conferences? Because for me, for example, I go to ISBNPA. I've been to ACSM. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. But conferences that typically present about, in my field, it's physical activity. So I go to conferences that talk about that. And then I have less perception about what other conferences that are not academic, what do people talk about in these conferences? Could you talk more about that?
Sure. And conferences are just one example now of activities
To network?
Outside the academic, yeah, to network, but also to present your work,
Okay.
not to speak or to participate, to contribute. And I think it really depends on how you've been networking around your own research, and especially in the field of physical activity and nutrition. There is an immediate application to most of the evidence we produce. So it's much more straightforward to find the links outside academia than, let's say, basic sciences, right? So it's also about how much of these network and collaboration you do prior, and then the participation in these non-academic events come naturally. Maybe
Okay.
to give you a concrete
Where
example.
to find out about them?
It's networking. It's paying attention to the processes taking place. All these global processes, in the end, they are made out of people, right?
Okay.
You see, the SDG agenda, in the end, a lot of people got together in different occasions, in different places, and they discussed what would that be, which targets we should pursue, which indicators we should have there, who would lead on this, on that, and it all comes down to people. So
Okay.
just to give you a concrete example of a good friend of mine who, while in academia in Sao Paulo, helped to develop the physical activity guidelines of a South American country.
Okay.
So he got that connection through another friend who's been doing this work. They've helped to organize this physical activity guidelines, and through that support to a national government, from academia, he got to know the fact that WHO is updating the recommendations on physical activity now, and he applied for becoming one of the experts that are part of the expert consultation group that will help WHO in this process. And that was an open call, for example. Anyone,
Okay.
you could have applied to be one of the experts, to contribute to that effort. So there are many different entry points. I think the most important is that we get out of our box, get out of our comfort zone. And then you in many cases, you also learn by doing. You learn how to interact with a city authority, with a national government, internationally, with the UN system. You just have to expose yourself to all this.
Okay. So do you and your colleagues, and Isabela, you can answer that question too if you'd like, attend conferences that are academic and non-academic in your current roles?
Yes. As Thiago was speaking, I was thinking about the importance of academia. Of course, is huge, but it's also its purpose is to be translated into action and to be that the knowledge be disseminated. So, very often, someone who is only working with academia, they don't have the language and the vocabulary to speak with people outside of academia.
Right.
So, engaging in different a lot of jargon. So like one example of an experience I did during PhD was I went for research in the Brazilian Amazon, and the University of Amazonas was completely different from University of Sao Paulo because a matter of geography and development and access. So it was a very important experience also to support the type of activities that I do now. So it's a very important skill is to be able to translate your academic knowledge into common language, easy to understand language for like the general population, or even in health centers or in universities in other countries where they don't have the same vocabulary. So yeah, so here in FAO we have we attend academic and also non-academic, very political meetings sometimes. Yes.
Yeah, I think one thing that is very important is for you to be good at what you do. Like, it's not, if you're recognized as an academic, as one of the main people doing what you do, you will certainly at some point be approached, and if you proactively seek that, people will certainly, because then they'll do like a search and they'll see, okay, this person may help me to move the agenda in this particular topic. Because one thing that we do, even though we have this academic background, we do not necessarily engage 80-90% of our time doing research.
Right.
A lot of times we commission research. Now we engage with institutions, and then we'll review and contribute and help to shape. And who will be the institutions we'll go after?
Academic institutions, probably.
The good ones,
right.
the ones that we know will deliver. So I think a very important point, even as a researcher, and we can see several examples of the association that have been contributing throughout the years to the work of the UN system, for example. And then when it comes to events, whether we attend, just to give you a concrete example, my last 3 missions were to the International Conference on Urban Health in China, which is an academic, it's an academic, mainly scientific conference. The previous one was a workshop to strengthen the capacity of Bangladeshi municipalities to address public health related issues through urban interventions. So definitely non-academic support to countries and cities. And the other one was a high-level meeting on sustainable mobility, which is, again, a non-academic, but it's also not support to countries. It's more related to the global agenda, global leadership. So it really depends on what is in your plate at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Thank you for all these answers and clarifications from both of you. I really appreciate it. I have a couple questions from the audience that are a little bit different from what we've been talking about. One question is related to if your organizations are actively trying to reduce air travel, that staff to reduce its impact on climate change. And then related to that question, I think is also another question. Can you work remotely, or are you expected to relocate to a specific place when you get a position?
So yeah, FAO is concerned is trying to reduce the air travel by staff. Definitely, that's a policy here, and climate change is a big priority because it's a result and it impacts food systems, food production. So it's considered one of the main challenges for the next years. So for sure, it's one of the priorities here, and gradually they've been improving their sustainability inside the headquarters and in country offices. Yes.
Yeah, same here. I think both from an institutional and personal basis, not only WHO is trying to be more environmentally and climate friendly on its operations, and we do have a very strict due diligence for environmental related issues, which is carried out by our department, the department I am in, which is the Environmental Health Department.
Right.
And we've been working a lot at trying to improve these aspects here. But what I also see is that a lot of the colleagues are, in addition to that, are voluntarily trying to take steps in that direction as well. So, but in my case, it's been like 20 years now. I only cycle and walk and take public transport on my daily commute. I'm trying to reduce dramatically my consumption of meat and many other things that we can also do in addition to the organization. As to whether we can work remotely, I think there are three answers to that. The first is that we can telework. So at WHO headquarters, we have up to 4 days of teleworking per month.
Okay.
When it comes to work remotely in a more permanent basis, it will depend on the nature of your contract. Some people working as consultants or under other arrangements that are not staff contracts, they can work partly or completely remotely.
Okay.
But that really depends on the nature of the work they're doing and on what is needed. And then the third answer related to that is when it comes to a mobility. So WHO is now establishing a mobility system in which staff will have to rotate across the different stations of the organization.
Okay. And what's the purpose of that mobility?
Well, it's similar to, in a sense, mobility is something that exists in many other organizations within the UN system, but also, it's common for you to see this in some corporations. I think the idea is that you maintain an exchange of knowledge and experiences across the organization so that people get to understand better. As I said before,
whole unit,
the whole unit. Even as Isabela mentioned, like working at the country level is very insightful in many ways for the work that you do at headquarters and vice versa. Working in different regions of the globe will make you deal with very different issues, cultural aspects, economic aspects. So I think it benefits the organization if implemented in an efficient way.
Okay.
Yeah, in FAO it's the same. Yes.
Okay. Question about, I imagine jobs are advertised on the websites of each organizations, but can you find about them on other places, or where can we look for those types of jobs usually?
I think it depends. It depends on the jobs or the opportunities. Let's put it more broadly. If we're talking about staff positions, then yes. In our case, you go at who.int, scroll at the very end, and you'll have a link on employment, if I am not wrong. As it's been a while, I've been there 2.5 years now. But for example, for consultancy contracts, then some of them will be placed at the unit or the department website, or some of them will be placed on a public repository, and there are many out there. Whereas for other types of contracts, for example, national professional officers or at country office, then the system might be slightly different. So it depends on the nature of the contract. For staff positions, yes, website, classical Stellis recruitment process.
Okay. Isabela, is that the same at FAO?
Yes, it's the same, and I would say that some organizations also, like some professionals associations, they also advertise like all sorts of jobs for nutritionists, for example, or in the nutrition field, and sometimes there are some UN jobs there too. So yeah, you would find it either on the UN or the UN agency website or on job advertisement websites. Yes.
Okay. We still have about 10 minutes left for our webinar today. I'm wondering if the members of the audience have other questions that they'd like me to ask our speakers. If not, maybe I'll, if you can type those questions in the Q&A, that would be great. I'll ask one last question to our speakers, and then I'll leave it up to questions from the audience for the rest. So my last question for you if, based on everything that you've told us today, if you have any other words of wisdom or things that you'd recommend from your experience that people that are students right now or early career researchers could do to make themselves more competitive to attain their goals working for FAO or WHO.
Yeah, I was reading one of the questions in questions and answers when they say this comparison between academia and the work in the UN, what it's like better. In academia, although I like it a lot and might go back to it, I think that sometimes you can feel a bit isolated when you're not sharing the work you do with colleagues, or if you're not going outside. So like you're publishing and you may sometimes don't know, you don't get in contact with people who are using your work, or like the University of São Paulo, where Thiago and I studied, they actually have a lot of strong relationship with the Ministry of Health. So there's also a lot of opportunities to go to conferences and to support health policies. But that's what I prefer, like with this integration and iteration that we have here in the UN. It's more than in the academia. So I feel like we are using the knowledge in a different way that I like it a lot. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's very much the same here. It's, work with passion on what you love, improve your skills, and that there are some skills that are basic, like language skills.
Yes.
And you have to have other languages to be operational in most cases. But also keep an eye on international priorities in your area of work, because I think that's very important. And it's also now, I think I said it before, is that you can and you heard that from Isabela as well, you can work with the same topic in different organizations in the system, in the UN system. So you see now a clear example, Isabela, as a nutritionist working at FAO, in which the majority of people will not necessarily be nutritionists, but they
Right.
still need nutritionists
Yes.
for a good part of the work. And the same here. Now at WHO, you have lawyers, you have engineers, you have physical educators, social scientists. So
Yeah.
that is also an important aspect of the work. And then if you want to follow a technical path, which is our case, no? Then it's really important to keep a track record, no? and continue your improving on your area. If you would like to follow a more strategic process path, and even if you come from academia, it's nice to have this background, but you should also improve your skills in that career path otherwise.
Okay.
Yeah, I would highlight also the networking. So something that I did many times and do it also today is like when I like someone's work, I email them and I try to talk to them and tell them that I like the work, ask questions, invite them for a coffee, and like a lot of people are very open. So this is how I met a lot of people, is just like also volunteering to support. So Thiago and I also volunteered on the same association, and that's where we met also a lot of people and had a lot of opportunities to learn. So if you're in your early career and you don't have a job yet, just volunteer to work with people that you admire. I think like some people might not accept, some people might not answer your email, but some will. So definitely contact people that you admire. I would highly recommend that.
Yeah, I think this is a really important point that Isabela is mentioning. Is I think a lot of people do networking for the game or for the sake of doing networking, and that's certainly not efficient. Now you should really focus on people that you respect and admire, people that you see are producing good stuff or are doing something relevant, and these are the people that you yes, get out for coffee, send a message, try to engage with them. Some of them will have the willingness to reply. Some of them will have the time to reply, because a lot of times we just simply miss emails because we get hundreds of emails per day. But I think it's important that the networking is meaningful, in a sense that you try and engage with people that you respect and admire, and that you would one day envisage working with, either together or in collaboration.
Okay. Maybe one last question. Would you say that your workplaces are family friendly or not?
I think so. Yes. I see colleagues with children, and there's a lot of consideration for that. So I can't say any details because I don't have children, so I don't know. But it is. I see a lot of support, and I try to support my colleagues with children, and I think that's should increasingly be promoted and recognized, especially for women, right?
Yeah, likewise. I would say that overall the organization has several family-friendly policies. I think the benefits package is generous for those with kids. So part of the school is covered, the insurance. So I think the work conditions in many cases are very flexible and accommodating. You have family sick leave in case of unexpected event in your family. So overall, I would say that certainly yes, the organization is doing a good job in that regard. And we also have the colleagues from gender equity and human rights helping the whole organization in making sure that gender issues and aging issues and many other relevant aspects are considered throughout the organization, so that we are diverse and equal in our operations.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, we have 1 minute left. I think this will conclude our webinar for today. Thanks again, Thiago and Isabela, for joining us today. We learned a lot from your experiences. And if our audience members have any other questions, do you think we can they can contact you or connect with you?
Of course, yes. So thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Thiago and Antonio. Yes, my email is Isabela Sattamini at FAO.org. So if someone wants to reach out and chat, I'll be, if I can help, I'll be happy to. And good luck, everybody, in your careers. Yes.
Yeah, no, likewise. And thank you again. Very nice to have engaged in this conversation. It's always a pleasure. And I'm coming from academia and being engaged in all these networks. It's very nice to be here. And of course, we're always happy to help and support. I see there's one question specifically on the global action plan for physical activity, and I had the pleasure to be involved, and I'm one of the focal points internally for the active environments part of it. The work is going, it's excellent. Many other activities are ongoing, and I'm happy to have you all guys on board and contributing, actively engaged in the work that we do.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Patrick. Thank you, Antonio.
Bye. Thank you, Antonio.
Bye.
Bye.